you think's the right move?
Honestly, I'm pro-genocide. It sounds really shitty, but like I think that Israel should just draw up its fucking borders about where it is now, and basically Palestinians can go live in another place. That's really shitty, but like that's about where I'm at.
You just think that Palestine should just pack up and Native American the fuck out of there?
The problem is that it seems like there is a hugely general hostility to Jewish people across really the entire world, definitely the Middle East. So the problem is that as you weaken Israel's ability for Jewish people to live there, it seems like because there's a lot of different organizations across the Middle East that are highly invested in the destruction of Israel. So that's like a really rough thing too. So it seems like if Israel is forced to make concessions to Palestinians, it threatens Jewish people's ability to have a homeland. And So I don't know. It's really shit. Truthfully, the answer is there's no good answer. It's hard. It's hard. It's a really, really complicated situation. It seems like appeasing either end basically means kind of the destruction of the other end. If you give Jewish people what they want, Palestinians are essentially permanently cucked out of what they feel is their rightful homeland. And if you give Palestinians what they want, then probably a lot of Jewish people are going to die. Right? Yeah. Here, I'm dragging in Rob too. You guys can both do this, okay? We can all do this at the same time. I'm just curious. I have no strong position here, so maybe he has strong thoughts on this too. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, hit me up. Wait, Rob, can you hear us?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, yeah. He's got feelings about Israel. I think a few days ago I said that I feel like the only solution to Israel-Palestine is Israel basically just slowly solidifying the hold on the territory they have, Palestinians basically just kind of being ass mad that they're slowly getting kicked out, and that more or less the borders that exist now, with maybe some exceptions to some parts of the West Bank that Israel doesn't care about, maybe slowly goes back to the Palestinians, but things like the Golan Heights and everything are never changing hands, and nobody around the world is going to enforce it, and we're just moving in that direction. That's kind of my position. And then LonerBox had an issue with that, so
when I heard you say that, because I rewatched the VOD before I joined in, and it did sound like you were kind of saying that you were asked what should happen, and I think you described it yourself as having a radicalized position. It felt like when I was speaking to you about it in the moment that you'd kind of moved on to this just seems like the most likely thing. So
I think I was giving that as a counter to you saying it was a ridiculous position, but I do think that's probably what should happen. I haven't heard a good argument for what should happen in contrast to that, short of everybody in the Middle East fucking chills the fuck out. If there wasn't such a threat to Jewish people in the Middle East, I think I would be okay, they need to probably give some of this land back or all of this land back and then kind of work out some solutions. But go.
Yeah, okay. So just to be clear, the reason I called the position ridiculous, or I think the word was retarded, but I think the reason I said that was because it was the should statement, because I don't really know how you could advocate for this position of which basically necessitates either ethnically cleansing or genociding millions of people.
Does ethnically genocide or does genocide or ethnic cleansing, is that necessitated if we're just talking about expulsion or
expulsion is ethnic cleansing
or whatever?
It would be a part.
It might be. I'm just making sure. When I hear ethnic cleansing, I think of killing fields, murdering and everything. But you mean ethnic cleansing could just be mass deportation of people, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
What do you mean by genocide?
Genocide's when you deliberately kill them, wipe them out, right?
Well, so you're saying it would lead to ethnic cleansing and genocide?
One or the other would be necessitated
or
by
the
my
other.
position.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, that's the thing I had a problem with, was saying that this is what should happen, because I think saying that should happen, that Israel should just grab more and more of what they've already occupied, in the West Bank. To me, I think it's a horrible position for the Palestinians to advocate for, but it's also actually, I think, even a little bit self-destructive to Israel, because it's a massive gamble, especially if you're a pro-Israel person, because as soon as you start doing that, as soon as you start annexing, realistically, you're not deporting millions of people anytime soon, and they're going to demand voting rights. And internationally, voting rights is a very difficult thing to argue against. And if they get the voting rights, then Israelis will quickly become either a minority or not big enough for a big majority, that the whole Jewish state, Zionist dream, dies with it. So that's the big it's the should thing I have a problem with, rather than
what do you think should happen? What is your outline me 3 scenarios above this, or just one, I guess, for what you think should happen?
I'll give you 2. So one is that we go with what is still kind of an international consensus that doesn't get enforced, which is stop the expansion of settlements, try and pull back on the ones that at least Israel considers illegal, like the outposts. And then,
wait. I want to bring up maps so that we can, just so I have like an eye for all this. Okay, hold on, because I might just geographically. Okay, when we talk about where all the settlements are these settlements that are typically like right outside Jerusalem, like to the east, or are these settlements that are more like to the north or south, like east of Tel Aviv, or where are like the settlements that people fight over all the time?
They're all scattered throughout the West Bank. It's like Area C. If you look up a map of areas A, B, and C in the West Bank, they're all in Area C, very much.
Okay, hold on. You said
Area
most of them
C.
are in Area C?
That map is probably not going to show you Area C. Yeah.
I'm just kind of fucking... Man, this is a... What am I looking at? Is this the Gaza Strip, this little white thing here?
I'll maybe find you a link. Hang on. Wait, what the fuck is that one? Oh, shit. Let me find you a map. Hang on.
How are we getting three-dimensional cross-sectional analysis maps? I feel like I'm looking at a biology class slide.
Just Google Area C map and go to images, like the top fucking 10
Area
or
C
Area
map.
C.
Okay,
Like,
damn. Don't be so mean. Chill. Hold on. Okay.
I'm
Area
furious.
C map. Okay, so is it the red thing? No, wait. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Your stream's a bit
Area
delayed.
C is blue and light blue. East Jerusalem is
Yeah.
in red.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the one, yeah.
Wait, so there are... Hold on. So there are Israeli settlements all the way out here?
I think
all
most
over the
of
West
them
Bank?
are in the western side.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, if you can look at if you look up Israel settlements map, yeah, they are, but they go all the way through as well and into the east. Yeah, some of them are actually near the Jordan River. So yeah, they're kind of all over the shop. This is why
Gotcha. Okay, go ahead.
Israel keeping so one position that is like maybe the Israeli right wing position, which is just that they take Area C, right, because that's what Israel already controls, and they leave A and B to the Palestinians. That's what gives you the Trump peace plan. You can look at that map as well. It just looks like a kind of batshit like
Wait, where is
leopard
I
print
need to
map.
see.
That would be
I
all
need to
the
see
white
area.
places being Palestinian.
Okay, that sounds like a clusterfuck. All right.
Yeah.
How like also can I just get my mind on this, okay? How big is this whole area in comparison to like a state? Like if I go from the north of the West Bank all the way down to the south of the West Bank, what is like the West Bank, like what is the size here?
It's a
Because
bit smaller
I'm looking
than
at this on a
Lebanon.
map and it looks really big, but then I see down here the scale here is kilometers.
Yeah.
It's like all the way from the north to south. Are we just talking like a few hundred kilometers?
It's a bit smaller than Lebanon, so yeah, it takes maybe not more than 2 hours to drive all the way.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I know exactly how big Lebanon is. I've driven across it so many times.
I'm referencing it for myself, just my thought process.
Okay. Can you do this in like terms of like Florida's or Texas's for me?
Driving for 2 or 3 hours will get you across the whole place, I think.
Okay, we'll get
One
you
or
from
the
top
other.
to bottom
I
for
think
this.
so, yeah.
Okay, crazy.
Not more than 2
okay.
hours, I think, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's pretty wild. All right.
That's also why, like, a lot of the refugees, even from back in 48, like, there's a whole thing where you get these photographs where they're basically in a refugee camp and they can still see the ruins of their old villages from, like, across the field. Yeah, it's a small area.
Okay. All right. Hit me. Okay. So hit me up with your thing you were saying.
So-
You said the Trump one of Jews keep Area C and the Palestinians are in this like leopard print is probably not
Probably
good,
not.
right?
No. So I'd
Okay.
say what's the more, I guess, like the American liberal or like center left position would be that they pull back on, they stop expanding settlements for one. They pull back on the illegal ones, which are about maybe 100 of them, and then illegal by Israeli standards. And then they kind of work out like a land swap thing, a settlement on Jerusalem, a settlement on refugees, and then they go with that, which is what like they've come fairly close to in the past. This is kind of what was the peace process of the 90s and 2000s. So that's one option, 2 states.
Okay. Wait. So repeat that. So Jews pull back from the illegal settlements, which are, you said most of them or?
No, it's like 100 out of 350, I think. Yeah. The outpost that Israel considers illegal. Yeah.
Okay. Where is the on this map? Where is the Golan Heights on this map? Yeah, in
North.
comparison to Jerusalem.
See where Jenin is in the north? Yeah, it's just north of the West Bank. But north of there's a bit of Israel, then there's Golan Heights.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's north of Jenin. There's the Golan Heights.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, that's one. I think I think Israelis are still fairly split. I think there's maybe a bit less than half of them believe in stopping the settlements. I think half of the parties believe that. They're all fucked out of power right now. But and as for Palestinians, they used to be mostly in support of that solution. They're a lot more skeptical of it now because of how much of a failure it was in the past. But yeah, that's one possible solution that I think is worth pushing for before the annexation thing. The other one is...
Oh, wait. My internet just blipped for a second. Hold on. It's coming back. Chill. Just calm yourself for a microsecond. You can still hear me, right?
But I also see a lot of Fs in your chat. Oh, no.
Is my kick stream still up?
Don't know.
Oh, sometimes YouTube is weird. I don't know why I did that. Okay. My kick stream is still up, I think. Weird. Okay. All right. Go. Okay. Also, I'm so sorry. Okay. So repeat that last thing one more time. I was looking at the map, getting it, and I have it in my... Okay. So repeat what you said, like the liberal thing was. Repeat that one thing.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's pull back on settlements, negotiate land swaps so Israel can keep the larger settlements in exchange for land elsewhere. Settlement on Jerusalem. Usually there's something like Palestinians get the Palestinian majority areas, Jews get the Jewish majority areas. There's some kind of like open city plan. Settlement on refugees, and then that's like the two-state solution that is mostly popular amongst like center left. Was very popular for Palestinians.
Can you tell me,
not so much anymore.
When you say pull back on the most illegal settlements or whatever, would this give... So just totally like a fucking retard opinion, but like I feel like no plan works unless you have like a whole country that's like connected start to finish. What you just said, would that give you like a decent chunk of Palestinian land, or would it still be like split into like 3 different weird fucking bodies of area?
Most of the maps I've seen, it looks like Palestinians keep like 97% of the West Bank. Like that was a lot of the plans from... so it's quite small. Like the very big settlements, there aren't that many of them, and they could just connect to Israel. Yeah, the connection would have to be Gaza in the West Bank. Yeah.
Gotcha. When I look at this area C map, are you saying that most of these blue and light blue areas have Jewish settlers in them?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So that you'd be pulling back quite a bit. Is it, just curious, when we talk about Jewish settlers, are they mostly a certain type of Jew? Like, are these like Orthodox Jews, or are they just like hip young Jews, or like is there like a particular type of Jews, or
a lot of working class Jews? It's much cheaper to not really work, but like it's cheaper to live in settlements. So people with families, but also the illegal settlements, like the ones that Israel considers legal, they are there because they are religious nutcases who think it's their fucking homeland. Like that's the only reason they're there. Yeah.
And so
they
most
set
people
fucking tents and like portable boxes and shit. Yeah.
Sorry to interject the flow of this, but I'm gonna back out until you're ready to talk, Destiny. I don't want to be rude. Sure. I don't really have anything to add to this. So
yeah, you're fine. I'll message you as soon as I know this. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Man to man. Where were we?
Man to man. You were saying that you think that nuclear genocide is not the way to go, and I was arguing for chemical weapons. Okay, gotcha. So, okay. So that's the hip thing, is pulling some Jews back from the most illegal settlements, whatever that means, and then kind of negotiating out to where like Palestinians would keep some 97% of the West Bank. Okay, go ahead.
And the other one, which I think is what I think I would advocate for if the scenario you're explaining actually happens, if Israel starts annexing more of the West Bank, which the current government definitely wants to do. It's like their top priority. If that happens, then I think you would have to support Palestinians who just want to make it one state with voting rights. And that's maybe where we would be at an impasse, or where we would have a disagreement, sorry.
The one-state solution, you mean?
Yeah, if Israel just keeps on annexing so that there's no possibility for a two-state solution, then Palestinians will switch their advocacy for just the whole thing is one state and voting rights.
Yeah, one state. I don't think anybody genuinely wants Palestinians might, but I don't think Israel wants a one-state solution, right?
They do, but they want one where Palestinians can't vote. That's like the far right of Israel.
Okay, so that's the apartheid solution, right? Huh. So, is there value? So outside of the Golan Heights, and I think that Sinai shit was given back to Egypt, right? Is there any value in the West Bank, like its land?
There's a lot of economic development happens there. It's like I think it's still quite fertile soil, and most of the economic activity that's quite important there is in like agriculture stuff. I think is Area C. So, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Huh.
So There was a question you asked
Yeah,
me.
and I'm aware that Golan Heights aren't part of the West Bank. I know. I was just curious if, yeah. And technically, yeah, they stole that from Syria, I think, during the 6-Day War. So that wouldn't even be on the table to get back to Palestinians, I imagine.
No, that's a whole
although I think
story.
Syria probably still wants that back. But, okay,
Syria's a bit busy right now. Yeah, so I think you asked me a question a little while ago about if we were talking about South Africa, and if let's say the whole question was whether you would choose apartheid or the white South Africans all getting murdered. Yeah. I don't really think that binary really exists. So even if we say like tomorrow, all the white Boer farmers in South Africa just get murdered, let's say that happens. Would you then say that ending apartheid was a bad decision, the wrong decision?
Damn, I don't know. I think this would be the more direct equivalence. This is what people would be saying, okay? If there was a whole bunch of, I'm going to just use black and white, we'll make it as inflammatory as possible. There's a whole bunch of black people in South Africa all saying, we're going to kill all the white people. We're going to kill all the white people. Give us voting rights so we can kill all the white people. And then you end apartheid, you reintegrate everybody, and then they kill all the white people. And then somebody looks at you and you're like, do you think that was a good idea? And you're like, well, yeah, we had to end apartheid. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is. Walk me through it. What do you think?
A lot of South Africans did say that. Black South Africans were saying that "Kill the Boer" is an anti-apartheid song. It's from way back in the day. I guess it would depend on the leadership, because the only way South Africa ever was going to end apartheid, it wasn't because of just boycotts and sanctions. Between that and ending apartheid, there were negotiations, like bilateral negotiations with Mandela and the ANC and the white South African government. So the leadership of the Black South Africans had to convince the white people that they did have a future in South Africa, that there wouldn't be massive repercussions, and the white people were only going to keep those negotiations going if they had assurances that that wouldn't happen, right? So that there would be property protections. That was one thing that Mandela did. That's why the Boer farmers are not all getting their fucking farms taken away from them. Other basic constitutional protections, because they're like technically a statistical minority. So that would depend. Obviously, if the Palestinian leadership was saying we want one state so we can throw the Israelis into the sea, you'd probably advocate against that. But I would imagine if they're going to have a leader that needs some level of American backing or international backing, then they're not going to be saying that. Yeah.
Because isn't this essentially the arguments that Jews give? And it's not even like that ridiculous. Like people in Iran, I think, right, do want to see Israel fall. They have an international fuck body, right? The IRGC that is directly involved in trying to murder Jewish people, I believe, by sending an international support to people like Hezbollah or Hamas, especially in the Gaza Strip. And for a lot of these people, I think they literally are like death to all Jews. We want to kill all Jews, death to all Jews. So I feel like that's when I look at like the conflict in this region, the issue is like it's not even really the Palestinians aren't even what we're really talking about. It feels like it's all of the other parties around them that have a high vested interest in seeing Israel destroyed, right? You've got Saddam Hussein lobbing Scud missiles over during the first Gulf War. You've got, like all these other enemies surrounding them. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, talk me through it.
So Iran has been saying that since 1979. Hamas have been saying that since 87. Neither of these groups were especially popular amongst Palestinians until kind of mid to late 90s. And I think what kept those groups at bay, especially Hamas, was the fact that Israel was engaging in negotiations. They had Rabin, who was started the Oslo Accords. There was some kind of like mutual recognition given between the Palestinian leaders and Israel. There was some kind of like path for peace on the table, and the international community seemed to be in support of it, like Clinton and all that. So I think whilst that was there, I think Hamas barely got like 15% of the vote, probably less. It was only after those negotiations failed, and then Hezbollah managed to kick out Israelis by not negotiating at all, then that Hamas just suddenly became the logical alternative.
So the gambit here, we're basically gambling on the idea that, I don't want to use the word appeasement because that's so loaded, but we're basically saying like, okay, all these people are saying death to Israel, but the only reason they're doing it is because look at Area C, look at how aggressive Israel is in expanding into Palestinian territory, depriving Palestinians of human rights, of essentially running an apartheid state. If Israel would just chill and be nicer to the Palestinians, then the drive or the goal
of all these Arabs in the area that basically want to kill Palestine, they wouldn't have anywhere near the popularity that they enjoy right now with Palestinians, is essentially the gamble that we would be asking for, which it would be a gamble, but you're saying it'd be a reasonable one. Like, yeah, they'd probably chill a lot.
The problem is that everything's a gamble, right? Like annexation is a gamble as well. So, but there's
Well,
one gamble is in
well,
favor of human rights, like directly. So, yeah.
Well, it depends on whose human rights we're talking about, really, right? And when you say that one side is a gamble, I'm sure that for Israel, they'd say, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and take the gamble where we have the most agency. And our ability to defend ourselves and fight other nations is we're going to gamble on ourselves, our military prowess and our intelligence and our allies, like the United States, rather than gambling that if we give these Arabs everything they want, that they're not going to try to destroy us again, basically, is what it sounds like.
Okay. I just don't think there's ever.
I'm not like 100% bought into this. I'm just giving like the other side. Like, what would have happened for the 6-Day War if Israel would have lost? Like, what would that look like? I feel like Israel would cease to exist as a state. Do you think, or what do you think?
Probably, yeah. I don't know that much about 6-Day. I mean, 6-Day War. There's so many fucking alternate narratives on this that I try to avoid that shit. But yeah. It's there's one possible scenario where that happens. Yeah, where they lose even the 48 war, and then they just all die. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the problem is that like Israel does at least have a position where they do have a very strong military and they have nuclear weapons, and they do have a position where they're never going to give up, let alone everything Palestinians want. I don't think that's ever going to happen. There's going to have to be concessions on both sides, but they're also never going to give up a situation that's going to result in them all getting like clapped. So whether that's if they give voting rights and they make it like a very federalized system where there's just like one state, but you've got both groups kind of like doing their own thing when it comes to voting for what kind of societies they want to build and that kind of thing. But I don't think it's much of a gamble to say right now, which is why I kind of like to focus on just more immediate stuff, is that like right now it's just like ending the settlements. That's like the first. Nothing can happen before that. Like there's no negotiations if settlements keep expanding. If that stops, that like opens a door, and then you can see what happens.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only scary thing though is it opens lots of doors, some of which are really good for everybody, some of which are good for Palestinians, some of which are good for Israelis potentially, right? Like, like that's like if they end the settlements, that it's kind of like it feels like when conservatives in the United States are like, do we want to ban bump stocks or do red flag laws? Like we would be okay with that, but we're scared that if we give that, we don't know what's next. And I feel like that's probably the concern for Israel, that like, well, if we stop the settlements, we start pulling back, like what's next for negotiations, I guess.
Yeah, but is that like so? What's if they just focus on that one move, like just stopping expanding settlements, which as far as the international community, that's like the consensus. They should do that. They should stop that. If they do that, what's like the worst thing that happens like right after that in response, you think?
Well, I mean, if you're not winning, you're losing. I mean, my guess would be is if they stop expanding on settlements, if they start to lose any, or if they slowly pull back from the expansive point and now they're stationary, then the next thing that people are going to fight for is going to be to pull back from some settlements, right?
I don't think anyone's realistically expecting the bigger ones to go away.
Sure.
But again, it's like anything that happens it's going to have to be as part of like a negotiated process. So I feel like if they can offer it's usually like one-to-one land swaps in exchange for pulling back from settlements, which has been accepted in the past. So I don't think it's going to be the case that they're going to expect like 500,000 settlers to leave the West Bank. Especially, I don't think Israel's ever conceding to settlers leaving, because after what happened in Gaza, they're never doing that again.
What happened in Gaza? That it became militarized and people
they got rid of
the
the IDF took 8,000 settlers out, and it was pretty like rough. I think some of those settlers to this day, quite a lot of them still don't have alternate housing, and it was like 15, 20 years ago. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's just, they're not going to remove that many at once again.
Okay. Damn. Well,
I think maybe
Israel-Palestine is pretty rough, huh?
Yeah. I think maybe the analogy you're going for sounds more like Rwanda. Do you know much about how that whole genocide like took place?
I know about Rwanda. The United States was involved in some conflict prior to that, I think in Northern Africa, and we did really poorly. And I think that people blamed that intervention later on us not intervening at all in Rwanda. That's the only thing I know about Rwanda. I barely know anything about it. Tell me.
So it's so it's an example of a historically oppressive group basically becoming the victims. The Tutsis were a minority, but they were also the wealthy, like landowning oppressors. They were the monarchy. When the Belgians and the Germans were colonizing Rwanda, the Tutsis had positions in the colonial government. There was a narrative, a very false narrative put out that Tutsis were actually like more Northern Africans, so they were like racially superior and shit. So yeah, they had like every advantage possible. And the thing with when the occupation of Rwanda ended in the late 50s and early 60s, the result was that Hutus made up 80+% of the population. And as soon as they had democratic power, they used it to attack Tutsis, like straight away. Not even in the 90s. There was already Tutsis like fleeing or facing repercussions and all that shit. And then obviously in the 90s, the Hutus did the genocide, right? But I think, again, if someone asked you, does that mean that ending colonial rule or bringing like equal rights in Rwanda, if someone ever said like, was that a bad decision? I would probably still lean with no. Like what the problem was is that the colonial government that left didn't give a fuck about what happened to Tutsis afterwards. There weren't any protections put into place. There was no constitution that protected people from being kicked out of their houses and all that stuff. So I feel like when it comes to Israel and Palestine, because there are so many massive international actors involved in it, I think it would, even if I think Palestinians get like voting rights and they use those rights to clap Israelis, like I think the point is going to be that it won't be the fact that it won't be equality that did that. It'll be like the way it was actioned. Same with Rwanda or South Africa.
Yeah, and I can understand the abstracted moral argument, but I'm sure you can understand that the on the ground feelings are going to be a lot different, right? That like, for instance, if I were to go to a casino and I were to bet my whole life savings on black and I win, you can tell me all day about how it was a bad bet, but emotionally it's probably not going to feel that way, right?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, on the ground it's really hard to say, because you can even take what happens on the ground with Israel and Palestine and even make really optimistic claims, because despite everything that's happened, is like there are still lots of intertwined communities, especially along the north of Israel and along the northwestern coast, where there are Arabs and Jews who live side by side with like in relatively peaceful conditions. And this like kind of happens in Jerusalem as well in some parts. So yeah, I don't know. I just think the
Jerusalem famously known for lack of conflict between
well,
Jews and Arabs. Oh, what's going on in Al Aqsa today?
Yeah, it's more like that's maybe a less good example, but
sure. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I would still say that that's why I don't think I could ever take the position that like we need to keep this group down, because on the off chance that they might fuck us back in the future. That's like the kind of position I find is that like the most untenable.
Yeah, I guess I figure it just seems that like because of the unique kind of Jewish history, it seems like if there's any group of people that could make that argument, it would be Jewish people, right? They have like 15 different holidays where it's like some group of people tried to genocide us and we lived and let's eat food. Like it feels like because of Jewish history, I could see them in particular being like, well, you know, we're going to go ahead and trust our gut on this one. Not that necessarily morally justifies it or even empirically justifies it, but...
Do you know the blood libel baby joke from Middle Eastern Jews?
Nope, tell me.
It's a Middle Eastern Jewish joke about there's this like village, I think it's Syria or some shit. And they're like, oh no, fuck, like a baby's just been murdered. Like they're going to blame us because the baby was murdered for like some ritual, and they're going to blame us. We're fucked. Oh no. And then a few hours later, they come back and it's like, oh shit, no, good news. The baby was actually Jewish. So there's not going to be blood libel repercussions. Yeah. They have a very grim sense of humor over there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking like if someone comes to you and says like, oh, what do you think should happen and all that? I feel like a much more reasonable response would just be like, even if there's no obvious solution, I feel like you could just say something like, yeah, the settlement expansion should probably stop. Israel should probably try to go back to being a bit more of a democracy with a court system, rather than saying what you said on that panel.
which is Israel
was-
just continues expansions until Palestinians
Yeah.
are basically it's just gone. How many Palestinians are there? Is it a few million?
Within Israel, Gaza, and West Bank, it's like 6-7 million, and then another 7 million in the diaspora. So
What's the population? Diaspora means around the world or just around the Middle East?
around the Middle East, around the world, but I think most of them are in the Middle East, like vast majority.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are how many Jewish people are there? Israeli Jewish citizens? Is it a few
6-7 million.
7 million. Oof.
I think
That's
there are
rough.
slightly more Palestinians from the river to the sea right now than Israelis. They overtook them like a couple of years ago because they have a lot. They have a lot of babies over there.
It sucks that the numbers don't work out in Israel. Like I feel like if there were 500,000 Palestinians, I think you could just say one state solution would be the best, and then figure it out from there. But
Nah, it's like probably 50 to 48 right now. Palestinians.
yeah, I know. Yeah, the numbers make it a lot rougher. You know. Okay. Well, anything else you want to add to this, or so Jewish people should probably chill on the West Bank settlements. Ideally, pull back the more controversial ones. I don't know where those are.
They're
and
also
then negotiate.
scattered. Yeah.
Yeah, and then try to negotiate some. I feel like carving out a real Palestinian country would be good. I don't know. Are there any countries on the map right now that look like what Palestine would look like?
What, empty bits of land that they could
Just like little scattered bits of like chickenpox land on a map. Is there any country right now that looks like that?
Oh, no, I mean, this is what that's what they tried to give in South Africa. It was called Bantustan, and obviously the black South Africans were like, "Fucking kill yourself." Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think so. I guess unless you count island networks. So probably no.
There's unironically so much pressure for American Jews to go to Israel and preferably find a Jewish slash Israeli wife and settle down there. It's cringe. Yeah, I've heard that. That's always one of the funny things is the difference I hear between, I think I've talked about this on stream before, my Jewish friends and my Nazi friends. Is like every time I debate with Nazis, they talk about how much of an exclusive club Judaism is and that it's very, 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 very hard to convert and blah, blah, blah. And then in the United States, bro, when I talk to Jewish people or like quasi-Jewish people or half-Jewish people, the way that they talk about how aggressively Israel tries to like get people into like birthright shit, that we're like, if you're like 1/4 of a quarter or if you've got friends, they'll like let you go on these things to try to do like PR for Israel and get people to move down, that it feels like Israel's like really aggressively recruiting like anybody that's willing to convert and go down and live there, just because obviously having the numbers in the population and the foreign ties, you know, probably makes you look better or more legitimate, right?
Yeah, meanwhile, a Palestinian who lives in a refugee camp in Lebanon who can still see their old house is basically like not allowed to go back to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking mental. But yeah, that would be things as well, because I guess one of the reasons Israel survives so well in Western politics is because they're considered the only democracy in the Middle East. But again, like that expansionist wing of Israel is gambling with that reputation as well, because they're also very anti-democratic. Yeah. With the Supreme Court thing.
What is the Supreme Court thing you're referring to specifically?
Israeli Supreme Court is like their only checks and balance system, and they basically just got rid of it. This is the
Don't
Supreme
they have
Court
like the
can't, overrule.
Kiznaz or whatever? Don't they have like
The
a
Knesset,
parliamentary?
yeah, but it's like that's the parliament, but there's no check and balance outside of that other than so they don't have three branches. They just have the Knesset and the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's basically just been completely defanged. Yeah.
Sure. Having one branch would be bad. To be fair, I think don't most countries have like two kind of branches of government? I think the United States is relatively unique with all three, aren't we?
I think it's more to do with depending on how constitutions work, you can probably get by with that, but
sure.
I didn't say they
People
got
are
rid of
saying,
the
like,
Supreme
the
Court. I said they
UK
were
has-
okay. Fucking being colloquial, your
Real-
fucking chat. Sorry. All right.
Yeah. People are saying the UK has a parliamentary supremacy. Yeah, but like your presidents and everything, your prime ministers come from within your parliament and shit. And I don't think they have anywhere near as much power as our president of the United States. You guys are saying bicameral. I'm not talking. First of all, when you say a bicameral system is common, I'm not even sure if that's true, because in the UK that system is barely bicameral. And also, I like having a head of state, a president that's elected by the people and wields so much power, I think is relatively unique to the United States. I don't know how many other countries do direct elections of their presidents that stand so much in contrast to their parliamentary system. But I also don't know. I could be wrong on that. Maybe other countries don't. I know more about the UK system than others, but
Yeah, a lot of it just depends on constitutional arrangements and shit like that. But yeah, as far as everyone who's not the Israeli right, like absolutely despises what they've done down there. So I'm gonna assume it's pretty bad. But yeah, I think that was. Yeah, I don't know. I think the reason I try not to go too strongly on any like very particular solution is just because as soon as one step gets made in whatever direction, everything else might change as well, right? Like, or opinions.
Yeah, that's the
can
thing that
change.
sucks
Yeah.
about. That's why I hate when people do historical counterfactuals. People are like, oh, if Germany would have just done this, or if Russia would have just done this, or if the US would have just done this. It's like, if they just do that, then you can literally analyze that one decision and like half a step past, but then every other variable changes, and then who knows what world we're in next. It's really funny when people try to like plan out like 15 steps ahead of like a major, historically altering decision that somebody makes.
I think the best way that I heard to look at it was we spoke a bit more recently about who gets what land and how do you morally decide who deserves what piece of land. And you kind of find out very quickly that's kind of impossible, right? Like Israelis will say, we get it because of the Israeli kingdom. And then Palestinians will say, well, there's a statute of limitations on refugee rights or being displaced or being indigenous. So and then where does that line end? Does it end for Palestinian refugees in 48? But a much easier way to look at it rather than land or states or anything like that is just like for me, like the issue with Palestinians and Israelis is fundamentally like human rights. There's like the right to not live under military occupation. There's the right to vote. There's the right to not be ethnically cleansed. There's the right, like refugee rights to either reparations or restitution. So yeah.
Here's something I'm kind of curious about. So here's something I have a really hard time with. I have a really hard time. Stop. That is not true. The House of Lords in the United Kingdom is nothing like the Senate in the United States.
No, it's not.
Yeah, okay. The United States has a true bicameral legislative body in that both halves have big elections. Both halves wield arguably equal power. They have the power to veto each other, at least when it comes to legislation. The Senate might have a bit more power, but the House of Lords is not even close to an analog for the Senate in the United States of America. Here's a thing that I have a lot of problems with. I have a really hard time talking about morals or morality when it comes to other countries and other governments. I feel like things get absurdly complicated very quickly. So like, for instance, in the United, even like a basic one of, should you be allowed to do the Nazi salute in Germany, right? Like they say no. As a US citizen, I have a big allegiance to freedom of speech. That's an obvious yes to me. How do you reconcile those moral differences? That's a basic one, but like more complicated ones might be like styles of government. Like I would say in the US, I would say it would be immoral to abolish our Supreme Court or immoral to roll our presidency into the legislative body, the executive and the legislative. But how do I make those same moral claims of other governances or countries, especially people of different religions or governing styles? Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I think for somewhere like Germany, you just have to, I feel like there is some kind of like universal moral, or you can just try to take what a country's doing, like Germany, and just look at what it means in their own terms. So with Germany, it's what's called militant democracy, basically. It's like in democracy, you have to curtail what other people might consider some freedoms to to keep fascism out. You can very quickly right now just look at the AfD vote in Germany and just be like, well, it failed. Look what's happening to you guys. Yeah, like your far right party has like more than 30% of the votes in quite a few parts of Germany right now. So,
well, but like, is that really what you want to go on? Because like, for instance, like Hitler's party had popular approval, and they were able to. My understanding is democratically establish the Enabling Act, which essentially became anti-democratic in the measures it was attempting to achieve. But does that make it good or bad? That was a conversation we had right before you joined stream, that like you could democratically throw away your democratic principles. Is that anti-democratic in and of itself?
You're probably not going to like this answer, but the Enabling Act wasn't like Germany was already not a democracy by the time the Enabling Act came. I think the first thing that they did that massively fucked the democratic system in Weimar Republic was two things. One is in 1932 when they abolished the Prussian Parliament, which was like the Papen coup, which basically meant the federal system was done. And that was like over, I think it was almost 50% of the population that made up. So yeah, that was like the big thing there. And also before that, they had do you know what Article 48 was?
That was when they came after Article 47, right?
Yeah.
Article 48 allowed the president to declare a state of emergency in Germany in times of national danger and to rule as a dictator for short periods of time. Oh, so this is literally the I feel like I've seen this quote like in 50 different movies where they're like, did you know that in times of great peril outside the gates of Rome, they would declare one man to fight or to rule the city and blah blah blah, right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so yeah, like that's the motherfucker that like everyone, the historians tend to agree was like the self-destruct button of Germany was Article 48. And that was misused by in the 1920s by social democrats. So yeah.
Sure. But then how do you also wait real quick? Are you an American? I keep forgetting this. I feel like you're in
Scottish.
Scotland or some shit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wait, so you're not American. You're not in America or anything,
No.
right? Okay. You have a guitar though and everything, right?
Yeah. American instrument,
Okay.
yeah.
Weird. And you're in Scotland.
Crazy.
No. But so like for instance, in the United States, sorry, half of what I say is sarcastic. So like in the United States, for instance, our president has wide deference to declare national states of emergency to get things done. So Pisco was arguing the other day, for instance, that the president ought to be able to declare, because of another bill that was passed a long time ago, a national state of emergency in order to forgive, I think, student loan debt. Or Donald Trump declared a national state of emergency to ban 7 Muslim-majority countries from immigrating to the United States. And Donald Trump declared a state of emergency to send the military down to assist with like building his immigration wall. So like arguably these are democratic measures because they're part of your constitution or they're democratically upheld, but then they can be used in like anti-democratic ways. So what is like, go ahead.
I think there are probably just some, I don't know. It just feels like when it comes to different countries or different democracies that there are gray areas where we think like there are certain measures or certain things that are technically democratic, but also not very, that leaders are allowed to do. But then there are some other ones that I think over history we've learned are a lot more non-negotiable. Like I don't think any state in any democracy in the world right now would reasonably bring back an Article 48, which means they can suppress like basically everything in the name of emergency. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Because we also, even in the United States, where it seems to be that the United States is one of the freest countries in the world when it comes to freedom of speech. Now, maybe whistleblowers, blah, 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 but in terms of just like what's on our books and what our courts defend. However, my understanding is during World War II, we literally had like an office of censorship. And we literally didn't let news stations report on, say, like the weather during baseball games and stuff like that, that we were actively censoring parts of the news or things that people were saying. So like, are these anti-democratic measures that shouldn't exist? Or I'm just asking. I don't have strong feelings here, so I'm just curious. Yeah.
I actually have. I don't know how I can explain it like ethically, but it just seems to be the case that most countries have done this and been fine when it comes to war situations. This is kind of like when people were saying that Ukrainians should hold general elections because America did it in the Civil War, right? And I'm like,
Hey.
or that like Winston Churchill shouldn't have banned fascist newspapers in the Second World War. But
or for Ukraine, like cutting out some of the Russian language media or whatever, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but I think it's fairly basic social contract to say that when a war happens, a couple of freedoms maybe need to go for a bit.
Yeah, but then you run into weird spots where in the United States we've especially with Iraq and Afghanistan, we were arguably at war for what, like 23 years?
Yeah, and then it depends on the kind of war, because I think the Civil War argument was that they still had the capacity to have elections during the Civil War in America, whereas Ukraine, all the polling stations will just get bombed. So it's like,
Sure.
Hi,
what's up, buddy?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, hi, hello. Hello, LonerBox, my favorite lefty, and, Steven. Hello. Yeah, so I wanted to ask a little question. Sorry to interrupt you guys. I've been sent a weird little clip where you were talking on a panel with like a bunch of ladies, I think, and LonerBox appeared to talk with you about like Palestine, and you said like this thing that basically Russia should kind of has Crimea because might makes right argument, and people showed it to me, and I was like, doesn't sound like what Steven would say. So I wanted to ask.
I think I think that the way that world politics plays out, as much as we talk about morality or foreign policy or whatever, that at the end of the day, it kind of seems like whoever has the military and influence to assert whatever they assert, that essentially becomes the rules of whatever land there is. So, for instance, like we can say that the invasion of Crimea was unethical, but the reality is Russia has essentially held Crimea unopposed for almost a decade now. Yeah,
And
and that's it. That was the only
I
statement I
mean,
was making, right?
I see. But it's still like illegal in terms of like international law because it was recognized as Ukraine after 1991
Yeah,
when we
but
get
law
independence.
systems, yeah, but legality only matters insofar as you can adjudicate and then enforce action based on the legality, right? So arguably, this is one of the biggest complaints
Well,
about the United
yeah.
States is that the United States might commit actions that some people would say, well, isn't this illegal? But then the question is, okay, well, what court is going to hear it? And then how are we going to enforce whatever
I see. So you're
measures?
basically making the argument like it's just how shit works. Basically,
Yeah,
was the
basically.
argument,
So this is why it's
not that it's
important for
legal or
things
moral.
like, yeah, like for NATO to exist or for the United States to intervene is because at the end of the day, whoever's got the bigger stick is essentially the one that's enforcing what happens around the world.
Yeah, that's how it works. I don't know why people are then commenting that it's a awful some sort of comment you made because that's how it works. But basically, they were saying they're like a hypocrite, I guess, because they said, "Oh, you like support Ukraine and like I'll fight for to preserve our like state and everything." But you say like that Palestine should just get over it because Palestinians, I guess, because they're like the weaker party compared to Israel. And
Well, I don't know if I would ever say, I'm talking from the perspective of Israel, but like, I don't know if I would ever say like Palestinians ought to just get over it. Like, I can understand why they would fight. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily condemn Palestinians for fighting against Israel to hold on to their land, right? But I mean, I think you can probably have conflicts where this is kind of goes into what I was saying earlier, LonerBox, in terms of like who's right or wrong. When you get to like these intergovernmental or inter-country fights, I can see there being arguably justifications on both sides to fight, which gets into a weird world because it's nice to be able to say who's right or wrong. But I can see there being, like, I can understand Israel's perceived threat to their existence, to Jewish people's existence, and I can understand Palestinians saying like, oh, okay, well, since the 40s, you guys were basically plopped here against our will, and now you've been fucking us the whole time, so fuck you. Like, I can see arguments on justifying both sides to fight each other. Yeah.
Also, if I'm not wrong, that Palestine was not like internationally recognized in terms of like borders or like as a country, I presume, right? It's not like Ukraine was in 1901 when the borders were and the territories were distributed and everyone agreed to it, including Russia. So it's not exactly the same, I think, in that regard as well.
Maybe after World War One, was there a big land cutout for Palestine that was more or less recognized by everybody?
There was the UN partition in 47 where Palestine was a lot bigger than it is now. And then after 67, the UN agreed on those borders. So yeah, the current borders are like the West Bank and Gaza.
I feel like there have been agreed borders for Palestine. They've just slowly gotten cut up over time. But even when we talk about agreed borders, like for instance, I think it was after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, Turkey had borders that were recognized by, it wasn't the UN at that point, right? It was whatever came before that. And then Turkey was like, no, fuck you. And then they had a big rebellion and they fought. And then they got their country like, okay, these are our borders now. After they had their big revolution for that. So yeah, the League of Nations maybe, yeah.
After like World War One, there was like this principle of like ethnic majority, basically. So like territories go to the parts that are, in Ukraine there was like a lot of Polish people, for example, in parts of the western parts of the country. So Galiciana, things like that. For example, Lviv, which is like the biggest, like the most important city in the West, it used to be like majority Polish. So in terms like of population, that's why it got to Poland, not Ukraine. Like, but interestingly enough, Polish made that claim that should be Polish because the majority there. But they also took Volyn region, which was majority Ukrainian, and the most people spoke Ukrainian. So it started like, we take this bit because it's mostly Polish people, and then we also take this bit because it's just because just because we can. So yeah, there was that as well. This is also the place where Volyn massacre happened. One of the reasons why. So yeah, not that it makes it any better, killing people, killing Polish people, but there was like a big tension there because majority was Ukrainian, and they felt like basically quite a lot of like repression there and bad treatment and things like that, which escalated, I guess, in World War II. Well, I mean, I wanted to debate, but there's nothing to debate. You made a point, and it was kind of correct. although not pleasant.
I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Anna.
Mm.
Let's say Ukraine gets everything back since the invasion, apart from Crimea,
Mhm.
and Crimea just stays like a frozen conflict for like 70 years. Would you say it's still Russian, or it still should go back to Ukraine?
I mean, I guess it's hard to say. Like, I do believe that we will be able to take it, but if not, then depends, I think, on the years. If, like, I don't know, like generations passed, and I think most people would consider it Russia at that point, to be
And
honest.
this is the rough thing, because when you say that, this is why Modi wants to build settlements in Kashmir, and this is why Israel wants to have settlements in the West Bank, I think, because I think fundamentally what everybody understands, even if they don't want to say it, is when it comes to the rules of who owns what, if you can just put your own people there and keep them there long enough, at some point everybody's going to be like, okay, fine. And that seems to be the goal
Yeah,
of
but
like trying to move people into area even for the Russification of states in the Soviet Union, right? If you move enough Soviet citizens there, move enough Russians in there, like eventually it's like, yeah, that's kind of our shit, you know? Yeah.
I mean, it changes obviously because we remain to be Ukrainian despite being Russified. So there's that. And but there are different situations. For example, Belarusi, right? It's basically, they lost identity at this point, to be
Sure.
honest. So so there's like, not to say that they're Russian, but technically, because they speak Russian. It's like 90 something percent speaks Russian. Most people don't know Belarus language at all. Like 10%, I think, do, or something like that. There's also the fact that Lukashenko, that potato Führer of theirs, he speaks Russian. Nobody like even cultural things. They're pretty much like basically Russia at this point. So if that happens, then yeah, I guess. But at the same time, you wouldn't say that Irish people are English, right? Despite the fact that they speak English. Or you wouldn't say like about Scottish people as well that. So at least you will get punched in the face if you say it for understandable reason. So yeah, not everything comes back to language, obviously, but culturally you can get assimilated to a point, but that there is definitely no difference there. But I do think there could be like cultural revival of sorts. I mean, it kind of happened in Ukraine all the time, despite them trying to prohibit the language, destroy it, prohibit the culture, prohibit identity, call us like Malorosi, which is like little Russians, basically. So they were like, executing people left and right, and for a very long time, and also like Holodomor and things like that. And despite that, people still seem to find this like return to the culture, to the identity, and the language survived. And so I think it's possible, but yeah, at some point, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, hard question, to be honest. I do think that one of the reasons we should return Crimea, of course, is because we don't want them to use it as a base. We don't want them to, to take it on a legal grounds, on a moral grounds, but it has not been like 70 years. So, yeah. Also, Tatari are the people who suffer the most there, and we want to help them as well, obviously. If speaking about this, like who actually like is Crimea natives, it's no Tatari, it's not Russians. So yeah, but they already executed the bunch of them, like deported them, back in 2 times actually, two deportations, and to Siberia and to like other parts of Russia as well. So I don't know, like majority there is Russian. That's the fact of the matter. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
Also,
kind of hard, I guess.
I'm gonna use the restroom and grab a drink real quick. 1 sec.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, LonerBox. Yay.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty well.
I was reading an
Trying to
article not too long ago about the Tatar situation in Crimea. I didn't actually know. I guess it was obvious, but even when they returned in the 80s and 90s, like from then on all the way until 2014, them existing in Crimea has basically just been this fucking eternal struggle for like restitution or
yes.
land, and they haven't. And because I think Crimea's big thing in as part of Russia is that like it's like a very big gangster capital kind of center, right, where land is traded often off the books. There's no official land registry that covers everything, so people just like that's kind of how most of the economic shenanigans happen. And then the result is that like Tatars basically just end up squatting to try and hold on to what was once theirs, or like
Yes, they have not been given like absolutely anything that was taken from them. So basically, when a bunch of them have been deported after World War II, which was another deportation. There was like prior to this another one, but this was like the major one most people talk about by Stalin. So yes, he like declared them basically Nazi collaborators, traitor nation, whatever the fuck, right? And used that as an excuse to deport them. Quite a lot of them died on the road, obviously, but plenty returned. But when they returned, they were faced with the situation that the majority of the population that was installed there was Russian. And they also took their literal belongings, their houses, like their, land, everything they owned, and just started living there, which is also what they do now, by the way, in occupied areas in Mariupol, for example, right? And so since then, pretty much Crimea Tatar have been fucked and trying to establish their lives again in Crimea after returning, but it has not been easy, and Russians have not treated them well whatsoever. Majority of stuff in Crimea was owned by Russia, even when it was part of Ukraine. So yeah, and I mean by that, like they had like autonomy in a way, right, to govern themselves basically. But technically, like there were like Russian flags everywhere. There was like institutions, or everything was basically under Russia. And Ukraine, since 91st, didn't do much as well, by the way, to help Tatari. I mean, we didn't treat them like shit, obviously, but we didn't like do much to help them, like return something, like some sort of like reparations or anything like that. And it was not great for them. But they, for some reason, are very pro-Ukrainian, despite the fact that we didn't do much for them, which I appreciate.
Well, that's because basically all the wealth of Crimea and like the land is basically in the hands of Russians, not Ukrainians, right?
Yes.
But
and also they kind of saw us as a better ally, I guess. You gotta have someone, they're not in the position to not ally themselves with anyone. So I'd say Ukraine in that regard is much better. And Tatari, all of them pretty much are very pro-Ukrainian and very like activist, very since 2014 have suffered quite a bit because of Russian occupation and annexation and everything.
There's something I find really difficult to imagine. It's like how this would happen if Ukraine takes back Crimea and you've suddenly got this post-war part of the country where you still have like the Russian settlers all the way back from the 40s living there. So you've got this area that's like 60% Russian just after a war between Ukraine and Russia, and them living there, and probably them still holding most of the wealth and probably most of the land, and how and what people will do as a way to like what's going to be done about that afterwards. I don't really know exactly what that would look like.
Well, to be real, there's like several ideas that are floating around about that, and fuck it, I will say it how it is. Well, quite a lot of people kind of hope they will escape. A lot of them will escape to Russia. So very like I guess aggressively pro-Russian Crimean people most likely will just escape, mostly because they're terrified of evil banderites, So
Somebody
it also,
said.
sorry, yeah, I'm trying to answer the LonerBox question. And so this is the thing. Quite a lot of them will stay and be like pretty much like conformist. So there are like quite a lot of Crimean people who really don't care that much. So they're not like Ukrainian patriots, to be real, right? But they're not like Russian as well. So Russian patriots. So they're like indifferent. They kind of see themselves as just Crimean, So like I don't know, like they don't feel like any sense of strong identity either way. And there are, of course, like a lot of Crimean people who are straight up like pro-Russian vatniks and imperialists, obviously. Those, I presume, will just run the fuck away. And there's also this idea of giving quite a lot of it to Tatari, of their stuff, I mean, and also probably settling people who lost their homes in Ukraine there also can be an idea. Because, for example, in Donbass, I don't know, like genuinely like 60-70% of shit is ruined. Even in my like region, Kharkivska Oblast, everything that is past Kharkiv to the east, closer to Donbass, is fucking ruins. So when I go to like front lines and stuff, just every village, every city is basically in ruins. Absolutely nothing left there, unlivable. So quite a lot of people who are internal internal like migrants, right? So they within Ukraine they moved to other areas, so less shelled areas, less war-torn area. So they could use that as well, I guess, because of Russian fucking invasion and genocidal shit, they lost all of their belongings and houses as well. And it will take, I don't know how fucking long to restore that, if it's even possible. So yeah, so different ideas are floating around, but most people, to be 100% real with you, don't give that much of a shit about how ethical it would be to remove Russians from there
That
at
doesn't
this point.
surprise me. But are these like
Somebody said-
post 20?
Mhm.
Sorry, go on.
Somebody's in a chat for you, LonerBox. LonerBox is slightly misinformed of the Supreme Court situation. Half of Israel is basically revolting right now, and the Supreme Court still retains its full power. Is that true?
No,
Did you lie?
I saw them in the Discord as well. I even said, like, after I said get rid of the court, I moved it back to effectively defanged. I already changed it because I knew that it's technically not.
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
God, they're fucking vultures out there, but yeah, not true.
Yeah, they are.
And when I was by this thing about voting in Ukraine, before I went to that accursed panel, I didn't know really that that would be even like a topic, because there was like topic about typical stuff about Ukraine, but there was like also this topic about how awful non-American and non-democratic it is that there will be no elections. And basically, the whole point of that was that you have to do those elections to seem like not barbarians to the West. So the West will support you. That was literally the point that the guy was making. I don't see SDL, I think, is his name. And he was like basically saying like, yeah, I understand that there are like a lot of issues, but we Americans did it when Civil War was happening. So why can't you? And I basically stole like LonerBox point when we was chatting with him, and he was saying like even in United Kingdom, like in Britain, Great Britain, there was no elections for a while, even before World War II ended, and there was no like German boots on the ground in the UK. They were bombed, obviously, but not there was not like millions displaced, like half the country displaced, half the country can't vote. It's just also not to mention the fact that million is serving, and it's a clusterfuck, like and administratively it's impossible. And I was trying to make those points and nobody was addressing them, and everyone was like, yeah, but it would be so democracy if you vote. I was like, guys, there are like bigger issues right now than democracy moment. But yeah, it was a bit weird.
Yeah, but that's why I think like when you're talking about ethical standards across countries and like what's a good moral standard for a country to behave, I guess it's just because there are some things that we do kind of treat as universal, like we have our international laws on refugees or genocide and all that shit, and then there are other things like the way you treat a Supreme Court that's more up in the air, or just like there are probably good cases for.
They were. They were saying male voting is a thing, and I was like, it's not a thing here. I mean, we never done it before, and they was like, oh, you should do it now, and I'm like, dude, like while I'm talking, like shit is exploding outside my window. What are you on about? Yeah, it was very strange experience. I was a bit shocked that was even a topic.
Some people just love democracy, you know.
I mean, yeah. And then I was trying to make those points, and another person, I think he's a conservative, Sparky something. I think he was very nice to me, but Spark Aircraft. Yeah, Aircraft Spark, yeah. But he was like saying, like, you see that just she has different values as a Ukrainian. She doesn't value democracy. And I was like, bro, we are literally partially fighting mostly for that, for the right to choose our like electives, for democracy, for our democratically elected government, for being part of European Union, and being much less barbarians as we are now. And I was like, it's not about not valuing democracy. It's about actual martial law and fucking war and being bombed. How do we prevent Russians from shooting at people at the voting centers? Like, do we do it like in the underground or some shit? It's just very strange. To me, it was very weird. Not to mention the displaced issue. I don't know, like, is it everywhere like that? But we vote dependent on our location. So what in your passport, basically, it says, like, in which part of the country you live, you should vote there. So you are registered like that. So for like 10 millions are displaced inside the country itself, not to mention people who left the country. And how do you arrange something like that? And why should we arrange something like that now? It's not even a question for Ukrainians, but But yeah, for other people, it has been, you see, Zelensky is a fascist moment. Whatever. Cringe.
Cringe. True.
Cringe.
Thank you. I like this word. I use it now all the time.
Yeah.
I blame Destiny for it.
Well, I'm probably gonna fuck off. Apparently, Hassan's doing stuff on Taiwan.
I've heard.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I think the
Oh,
same
no.
person is posting in your chat as mine.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Not
Yeah,
Hassan takes on geopolitics. Not
Anyway,
that.
The
sounds
best, the
sounds
best of the
crazy,
best.
chat. Okay, fucking, I'm gonna go and maybe watch that. Nice talking to you, Anna.
Yeah.
Dustin, stop advocating
Yeah,
for
bye-bye.
genocide. Okay.
Love you, baby.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Nice one.
Be careful.
All right. Bye bye.
I love LonerBox.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. All right, I'm talking.
Oh, that's so
I'm
sweet.
gonna chat about Burisma.
Oh no, Burisma. No, get me away. Oh God.